Okay, for those who don't know me, my way of working with this group has formed into a weekly exploration that goes beyond what we encounter by our meeting. So I come out of each meeting, like the rest of us, with some sense of research over the next week. And I like to engage with the material by compiling these little presentations. I'm able to use image and text, so it's really satisfying to me in my own learning quest. So that's what these are. They're explorations, and I get into territory that I really know nothing about, and so I'm looking to you to help me flesh out what has come through in this last week, for example. So away we go. If you type YOD into your search engine and go for images, you'll come up with all kinds of things. I really enjoyed this because it, in many respects, my direct experience of the YOD is based in, as I said earlier, the progressed lunation technique. And maybe you'll see why this image is an indicator of that aspect. Like Radlina, I highly recommend this particular book. Aspects in astrological, and I can't read what's under that. Astrological study, is it? Should be understood as injunctions or instructions, telling us how the activities or functions represented by two planets should be related to one another in order to fulfill what is needed at a particular phase of the whole cycle during which the two planets relate to one another in all possible ways. So this is Rudyard and Rael, conjuring up this notion of wholeness. Like we must always keep in mind the whole cycle of relationship. In other words, aspects tell us what to do with what is represented by two planets relating to one another in an especially significant way. The particular significance of the aspect or interplanetary relationship derives from the place this phase relationship occupies in the two planets' overall cycle with one another. So there's our basic YOD pattern. And what I'm prone to do is to overlay the lunation cycle, because the lunation cycle is the archetype of all cycles of relationship. And as Rudyard and Rael have consistently taught, we can look to the overall structure of the lunation cycle as a matrix within which all of the aspects play out. So if you integrate this lunation template into your consciousness and work from that place, you will build up a consistent psychology that's grounded in fundamental principles. So we see the different keywords associated with each sector. And if we look from the source at the new moon down to the sextile relationship, those two keywords alone speak loudly. In the waxing portion of that configuration, we have overcoming is featured. In the waning portion, fulfillment. So just keeping those two keywords in mind, that's fundamental to the whole nature of the YOD. The overcoming and the fulfillment, with the opposition being the awareness point, the greatest objectivity. The lunation cycle book on the left is an updated version of Rudyard's original lunation cycle. This particular one includes, importantly, the lunation process in astrological guidance by Layla. This is where the whole progressed lunation technique is brought forward and made understandable. And I highly recommend that book, as it's a foundation work for all of Rudyard's work, that's for sure. The progressed lunation is a secondary progressions technique built on the convention that a year after birth accords structurally with a year in the life. The technique integrates the progressed sun and the progressed moon via the constantly changing phase angle joining the two. The most primordial starting point for exploration of the progressed lunation is the new moon before birth. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. My graphics at the left attempt to evoke this notion of the progressed lunation technique. What it's doing is mapping these different progressed lunation cycles in our life, and they're essentially our process of expanding consciousness, expanding according to a pattern that is predictable, structurally predictable. And so if we understand the inner structure of the lunation cycle, we can understand the different phases of our progressed lunation. Now, back in the early 70s, early 80s, there was a service in California called Astronomeric. I don't know if they are still operative or not, but they used to offer a printout of your progressed lunation for the life. So 84 years of, I think that's what they used, 84 years or 90 years. And you had the whole of that inner structure of the lunation cycle mapped out with specific dates. So we see down here at the arrow, I knew exactly when to expect my waxing quincunx to occur. And there it was, October 31st, 1985. Now, by that time, I was virtually, I started studying Rudyard in 1972. By 1985, I was well on my way to, because I was very passionate in studying him, I was really wedded to his model, especially the model or the tool of the progressed lunation. So this is my progressed lunation unfolding. I'm aware of it on a phase-by-phase basis, and I'm coming into October 31st, 1985. Well, this is another way that I'm working with the lunation, the progressed lunation, keeping track of different events, inner outer events, realizations, specific turning points. And as the arrow points to, there's the 150-degree waxing quincunx. Now, at the time, I understood that to be a very important decision point. I went into it as someone anticipating a future fulfillment of some kind. I had a sense that there was a much bigger and broader life for me if I made the right decision at that point. And I was under extreme pressure. I think of that, the span leading up to that decision point was probably the most stressful point in my whole life. I was very aware that basically I was engaged in the individuation process, and I was up against all the programming from my past. I put in 15 years formal education. I had a lot of programming that was actually in a sense at odds with the what I was experiencing inwardly, the vision that was rising of the life that was really meant for me, not the life of the status quo mentality that brought me to that point. So it was a major turning point. When we zero in, the inconjunct or quincunx, as I understood it at that time, clarification, bringing consciousness to a focused state, clarification of one's concept of self. Now that was exactly what I was going through, was clarifying my concept of self. And in that process, I determined that it was important for me to bring all of my skills, which at the time were some skills and interests were into astrology. Others were, I was making my livelihood as a silversmith, and I had a shop, a rock shop, with all kinds of overhead. And that was a difficult time financially. I had to make personal adjustment to make it through. And the personal adjustment I wanted to make was to go into my home as my base. And I have a part of fortune in the fourth house, and I was aware of that, and I thought, I've got to find that place of integration where I can work from my own home, that I'm not dependent on an overarching structure of expense. And so it was a way of cutting back that expense and still being able to maintain my skills from my home. Now, I was so clear as to that decision that once I made it, I felt relieved. However, what it did was bring up in my long-standing relationship, I married my grade 8 sweetheart, and at this point in '85, I'm born in '49, so I'm in my 20s, whatever. My grade 8 sweetheart and she realized that I was never going to be the man she thought I was going to be, and I was sure of that as well. So we parted company just a few months after that. This is me, working graphically with my progressed lunation at that point. The arrow there is pointing to the same spot, the waxing quincunx. On the right, as it indicates, the progressed sun. On the left, the progressed moon. But what I'm tracking is the phase angle between those two. So this is like the most personal progression point that you can look at. Primordial sun, primordial moon. And you've got those two wedded, and you're moving ahead towards at this point, some kind of future fulfillment. And that's what was drawing me forward. Now there's also the waning quincunx. So I made my decision. By the time I hit full moon in December of '87, I was involved in an absolutely a completely different life than what I had lived prior to that. I was engaged in all kinds of metaphysical activities. I was into ceremony. I had a swirl of people that I associated with that were of like mind, and it was just a completely different lifestyle. So just as a peak, January 25th, I go into my journal. There's my journal entry for the new moon beginning January 26th, 1990. And I'm tracking, once again, this is a journaling practice, just keeping track of the inner and the outer very consciously. And I'm synthesizing different symbolic systems. This is my nature as an Aquarian with the moon in Aries. I'm consolidating these different belief systems in ways unexpected to me. The insights that did the consolidation came suddenly and unexpectedly, but I acted on them, and they just kept mounting up and mounting up. So by this time, I was well into that integration and now into the place of sharing what it was that came together for me at my progressed full moon. And just to give you a sense, There I am at in 1990. I'm engaged with the Mayan sacred calendar, that's Tzolk'in, integrating that with the lunation cycle, teaching of Rudyard. On the left, you'll see the sun and moon are a part of an image attributed to Benjamin Franklin, and a whole, as it says, Franklin's descriptive drawings showing aurora borealis. This is the kind of territory that I was swirling with and investigating as a consciousness explorer. Now, we've been talking in recent weeks about the anaretic degrees. It occurred to me in this exploration that the degrees of the zodiac that accord with the 3 points of that triangle, 2 of the 3 are what's called anaretic. They're the final degree of that particular zodiacal sign. And now looking to the Sabian symbols, if none of you or some of you are not familiar with the Sabian symbols, they're a body of symbolism where there's one symbol for each degree of the zodiac. And Rudyard especially has gone in and interpreted each of those symbols so that they're available to us as tools for delineating the meaning of particular degrees. And interestingly, then, if we look to the new moon, we get the first degree of Aries. This is the initial emergence of new forms and of the potentiality of consciousness. It's that primordial impulse to be. Phase 150, Leo 30, an unsealed letter. The keynote, the realization by the individual that all thoughts and all messages are inevitably to be shared with all men. So the emphasis at that waxing quincunx point is a sharing, according to this schematic, as opposed to the waning quincunx, the 210 degree, 3 mounds of knowledge on a philosopher's head. This symbol came up last week. Keynote, the fulfillment of man's power of understanding at whatever level of existence the person operates, a holistic approach to knowledge. So I wasn't aware of these Sabian symbols and their relationship to the quincunx as I moved through it consciously back in the 80s and 90s. But as I look at them now, you know, I'm in my current cycle, I'm approaching the 210 degree, the Libra 30 point. And this particular symbol seems exactly right for what I'm attempting to consolidate in my own life. It's just another turn of the spiral, but a much deeper integration of knowledge gathered from multiple traditions, multiple spiritual traditions. That's really what I'm about at this point. I noted this week then that as well, the fixed star Regulus aligns with Leo 30 degrees. So another layer of investigation, perhaps, another layer of consideration when we're looking at that particular point in the whole process. Regulus associated with the lion's heart, the most royal star, Raphael, the healing archangel, watcher of the north, nobility, ambition, alertness, great power, status, leadership, sudden downfall, accidents, violence, fortunate, and somehow related then Mars, Jupiter, Uranus. So I'm only sharing this because the fact that it aligned with Leo 30 seemed at least interesting, but certainly worthy of more investigation. So that's kind of it from this week's exploration, and I'm quite open to sharing and questions or comments, whatever.
Dwayne, I noted that you used, you're talking about the anaretic, the 29th degree of Leo and Libra, rather than, or the 30th degree of Leo and Libra, rather than 0 or the first degree of Virgo and Scorpio. Is there any particular reason why you did it that way when you're talking, because you're going from 0 Aries, correct? First degree of Aries.
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, when I'm investigating all this stuff, I'm totally unconscious of things like that. But that's a good point. I mean, it's that whole, we've talked about the anaretic moment.
Yeah.
Where it has two faces, you know. And so, yeah, that would be a more fuller presentation of the quincunx, would be to have both at each of the 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Yeah, that's a great insight.
And
because we're getting right down to the fundamentals here.
You're 30 degrees Leo. I was at where the Regulus is.
Yeah.
Where in the YOD was that? I don't know your chart well enough that I couldn't relate to where that was in your chart.
That would, if you're looking at the diagrams I had, I can go back.
Well,
would be
was that the apex
upper
point?
Lauren, that would be the upper
YOD. Okay.
Because it's waxing from 0 Aries.
Where did we go here? No, it would be in the bottom left corner. Is that
that's yeah, but it's still the upper YOD because it's waxing toward the opposition.
Exactly.
Good. Well, sorry, and I hadn't memorized where everything was when you showed the Regulus. I just thought that I wanted to see that. Thanks.
Welcome. Now, I sometimes think of these 2 bottom points as being like, have you ever looked up and seen what we call sundogs?
Yes.
Yeah, like that to me is kind of the essence of the YOD right there.
Dwayne, are you familiar with Lagrange points?
No.
They're points of gravitational equilibrium in where one body orbits another. And the best example of that is Jupiter and the Jupiter asteroid. There's a cluster of asteroids that orbit in front of Jupiter and another cluster that orbits behind Jupiter. And both clusters are basically centered at around 60 degrees from Jupiter.
Wow.
And so I got the idea that, because those asteroids are basically trapped there. Right. So there's a hidden element, I think, to the sextile where something can be trapped or captured and not be aware of it. And that may be why the sextile isn't as necessarily as strong or as positive as it could be, because the person would need to be in awareness that, you know, there are certain things they can't do. Interestingly enough, those asteroid groupings are called Greeks and Trojans. And the asteroid Eris, which one is it? Okay, Achilles, I think it is actually in the Trojan group. And who was the Trojan hero? His asteroid namesake is in the Greek group, and it didn't. The naming of the Trojans and Greek groupings came after the asteroids were named, and it just turned out that way. So I think mythologically, it's almost like, you know, it's the as above, so below. You might want to take a look at Lagrange points. It's interesting because basically they create a kite formation.
Right on. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. Anybody else there?
Can I just ask you in relation to this that you've just put up, because here the apex would be between emergence and release. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be your new moon point.
And that would be the new moon point. Okay. Now, I was really very impressed by your charts, the way you have you're using your journaling in relation to this. And I was just wondering, the very first chart you showed, there was a lot of stuff on the left-hand side at the bottom, aspects or transits, or you had written a lot of notes, but I don't particularly want to, if you know the one I mean, the very first chart, and so of your where you put the superimposing the two and your notes there,
right?
And there was a lot of stuff that you had written on the left side on the side of the overcoming. And I was just wondering whether that was already that you had sensed that this is the stuff that is to be overcome. Just trying to see how you're using your journaling technique, I guess.
Yeah, maybe we could go there. I'm just trying to remember if this is before this image or after.
Oh, before this image, the very first. No, so then.
Oh, so it goes the other way.
Yeah.
Here we go.
The very first chart that you showed that from your journal.
Okay.
Would you had actually written out stuff?
Yes. And which aligns with the point in the cycle.
That's what I was thinking, because I found that really interesting. So not this one. So then you have the one where this is the one, this one, right?
Right.
So here on the left-hand side, you have all these notes written down. And I was just wondering whether they were related to the left side of the YOD, which they may not be. This might be my fantasy.
Oh, no, you've got it exactly right.
Okay.
And you can see,
that's amazing.
That whole actions portion of the cycle.
Yeah.
That was me, I'm by that time, I'm a few years into Rudyard, and I'm really aligned with his worldview, and I want to go there. I want to help bring that into form.
Yeah.
And so it was a very intense time for me.
Wow.
And as we get closer and closer to the YOD, somewhere, I think it's in the Rudyard Rael aspect book, they talk about it as being the last chance aspect.
Wow.
If you are moving in a direction, what's happening is you come from this really subjective place and instinctual back at the progressed new moon.
Yeah.
And then as you come up and through the first quarter, there's this challenge from outside, and you've got to decide to turn your life it's like they talk about taking the steering wheel in your hands.
Yeah.
And steering your life towards some distantly sensed future fulfillment.
Yeah.
So the progressed full moon is starting to show up in the life. And as it becomes as we become more and more conscious of that, there are decisions that have to be made. to steer in the direction of that fulfillment. Otherwise, it's like the car is taken over and it heads off in whatever direction the momentum will carry it. So it's that point of choice and of determination to make it.
So can I then ask you, because then you have actually put in the middle here, you've put a little hut in the woods.
Yes.
Yeah. So would that be the place where you would be gathering together? Because that's the midpoint, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of the sextile. So is that? I'm just trying to think how, because I find it's extremely creative. So that's where you're sitting, like, you know, and kind of gathering together all the
absolutely
the download, as it was.
You've got it exactly right.
Yeah. And then
day after day after day of download and you know.
So therefore, when you came to the other drawing of yours, where literally it's all the energy is towards the apex, literally, not that one, further along.
Yeah,
I also found this one here.
Yeah.
So one can almost see the energy going, no, not this one, the one before there, that one. You know, one can almost feel the energy going towards the apex.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. It's very powerful.
I see that I created that particular image, October 28th, 1984. And this is important. The grid that we have, the horizontal lines, okay, each one is a degree within the lunation structure.
Okay.
You can map your birth chart onto that grid. And my Pluto aligns with phase 136. So you see at just above the word progressed, there's a little symbol for Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking that was me. I'm getting a Plutonian download. You know, from then on, things just got more and more unbelievable and connected and you know, just exciting and virtual days of download. And because I had shape-shifted my life in order to be in a place where I could receive such downloads, you know, that's the important factor there, the choice point. If I hadn't made that choice at 150 degrees, I'm pretty sure the lifestyle that I was in at the time would have killed me.
Oof,
sooner or later, you know.
Thank you. That's amazing.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I'm noting that we talked about the Sabian symbols, and the one that aligns with that waxing an unsealed letter. I mean, here I am sharing very intimate aspects of my life with you all. And that's what's called for with that particular symbol, that particular degree.